Hey, what is up, everybody? I'm here to give you my weekly Spongebob review that I do every single Monday. Uh, now, last week I didn't do one because I was working, and then my friend came over, so I never had the time to make it. So this week I'm going to change things up a little bit and do two, considering the fact that I missed last week, so I have to make up for last week by doing two this week. Um, and let's get right into it. This one is called Everybody's Talking, the Voices of Spongebob SquarePants review. This is going to be my review of that. Odd name, yes, but that's what it says there, so gotta write that down. That's going to be the title of this video. And this is pretty much who plays the characters and how they utilize the characters and stuff like that. So I'm going to shut off the Xbox now that I know their names. Alright. That's all. I don't even know what that is. It's a Wi-Fi thing. So let's get it started. Steven Hilberg, the creator of SpongeBob, talks about how he had to make whoever was going to play these characters had to fit the role of these characters, and he feels like he found some of it. And I'm going to talk to you about each one, because something I like that they did with this is they talked about each individual one and what their character was and how they played their characters. I thought that was awesome. So let's start with SpongeBob SquarePants, since he's like the main character. So SpongeBob SquarePants is actually voiced by Tom Kenny. And he talked about SpongeBob. Now, Steven Hilberg had the idea of SpongeBob. He came up with the idea of SpongeBob SquarePants because it's both literal and, what's it called? Figuratively. He literally is SpongeBob SquarePants. He actually is a sponge, and he's in the shape of a square, and he wears square pants. But he talked about how he also is more than that. How he also is more than just a sponge that wears SquarePants. You can actually see in the background right there where I'm pointing, you can see SpongeBob SquarePants. So I didn't even really need to explain it because I just noticed that now that he's in the background. But what happens here is SpongeBob SquarePants talking about how he is kind of like an odd fellow. Like, he is very flappity, like you notice. Like, he waves his arms flapping in a flappy fashion, works in a fast food restaurant, and talks about how he's like a man-child, which is a very true statement. Because he goes to school like a kid, but he works at the Krusty Krab like an adult. And he talked about all this crazy stuff he does, and they just really went like in full depth about SpongeBob. And they even like play this old tape recorder with Steven Hilberg playing the role of Squidward and Tom Kenny playing the role of SpongeBob, and it was pretty good stuff. SpongeBob SquarePants was talking about how he likes the Krusty Krab and stuff, and all the people that are in it. And Squidward, being typical Squidward, talks about how he hates standing on all his tentacles and taking orders and stuff. And then they talked about how they do the voice of SpongeBob and how it's like a high-pitched, cartoony voice like the Munchkins from The Wizard of Oz. And he talked about how he's like kind of like a cool bad boy sometimes and all that stuff. And then what ended up happening is they talk about how he'll try to help people, but then it backfires on him. How it will be like people are just going down a hill, going shaped like a snowball going down a hill, and that's true because they showed the scene from the Hall Monitor episode when he saw that there was a broken traffic light and he tried to help the cars get by, and he ended up destroying the cars and the bus and all the vehicles. So then I thought that was awesome, and he even showed us how to do his laugh. Like, you have to make it like a high-pitched, kind of like annoying voice, which he made like the most annoying voice I ever heard in my life. And you have to like flap your thing like that. I don't think I can do it. I used to be able to do it, but then I went through puberty, my voice got deep, so now I can't do it anymore. And then they went on and talked about Squidward. And he is played, I think it's by the Squidward Tentacles. He is voiced by Roger Bumpass, or Bumpus. I don't really know how to say his name. And they talked about how he's like the big artist wannabe. He's always angry all the time. He wants better things than what he has now, and he isn't clarinet wannabe. And they talk about how he's the only one that sees SpongeBob as crazy. Like SpongeBob will be completely crazy and no one will notice it, but he will. And they did an example like SpongeBob when in the pizza delivery episode when he was on top of that rock and talked about how the pioneers could do all this great stuff and even drive rocks, and Squidward was going off on the pioneers and talk about how there's none of them left and shit. Yeah, it was that episode. And they talk about how he has the big nose and how he has the big nasal, like how he talks a little nasally. And they talked about what's his name? Just lost him. Roger Bumpus talks about how Squidward really does have a good heart, but he just covers it up in this show. And then Tom Kenny, the actor's like, so you do care? And he's like, no, I was just using that as a cover up. So I thought I liked that. That was a funny scene that happened in this. And then they talked about Sandy and how she's like a relationship kind of like a girlfriend kind of figure for SpongeBob. They do all this crazy stuff together, and it ends up hurting SpongeBob in the end. And they talked about how she was from Texas. So then I even forgot to. So then Sandy, who was played by Carolyn Lawrence, had to learn all this Texas stuff and had to think of a Texan that ended up being pretty smart, and talk about how most of Sandy's voice comes through a buck teeth. And I thought that was good stuff. And they even played that. They even like showed like them voicing the scene when Sandy decided to stay home, and they taught us that big lesson from the Texas episode. And then Patrick, who was played by, I know this is like Bill Fager Blake. No, Fager Big. I don't know how to say his name. Last name, anyways. But he talked about how Patrick has like a very deep voice, and he talks very slow, because he's stupid. But he always talks about how Patrick will go into doing bad things to SpongeBob, and it even showed that scene from Hooky when they went to the hooks, and then they showed the scene about how he was when Bill was going like this when Patrick all the hooks on his mouth. It's him saying, "Does this look dangerous?" And then they talked about how Patrick. They just pretty much talked about how dumb he was, and then they get to Mr. Krabs, who's played by Clancy Brown. And he talked about how he's like the only adult in the show other than Mrs. Puff. Like, I think he's like the only adult that's really in the show, which is actually very, very true. Cause I always you think Squidward is an adult, but I think Squidward's more like a teenager. SpongeBob's obviously like the kid, and Patrick's like a kid. So they talked about how he's a adult, that he loves money, and he owns his own company, and they talked about how they did his laugh by just making a bunch of pirate sounds and just did it faster. So that's Mr. Krabs. I thought that was good stuff. And then Plankton, who was played by Mr. Lawrence, talked about how actually they came up with the voice of Plankton because Mr. Lawrence was saying all the lines that SpongeBob had in the first episode, Help Wanted. And now he was saying that as the voice of Plankton. And then talked about how Plankton has different voices, so when he's good, his voice is higher, but when he's bad, his voice is lower. And talked about how evil he is, and when people come to autographs, it's like people, Plankton really is evil. So then we get to they talked about Plankton, so then we get to the interstitial voices, which is like the recurring roles, but they're not like the main characters in the shows. And they're played by D. Bradley Baker, Sarah Paxson, and Serena Irwin. And they talked about how what that is, and how they play a big role in it too. And they talked about how they'll keep showing up, like the little kid that wanted Plankton's tractor in the Walking Small episode. There'll be somebody ordering a Krabby Patty. The police officers when you see them, and that's about it. Probably, and they talk about how they have to they contribute a lot too, and they talk about how there'll be like a thought bubble, or there'll be like fish number 37. So I thought they talk about, and then at the end they all talk about how all the wolves fit each other and they like working together. So that's the end of this SpongeBob review. And that's pretty much it, guys. Subscribe to this channel, and I'll be back in a few moments to do another one. I'm gonna do some stuff, and then I'm gonna sit down and watch it, and that's pretty much it, guys. See you later.